Hello and welcome. Thanks much for joining us on Live Mint. In conversation with me today, one of the most dynamic ministers of the Narendra Modi-led NDA government, a leader who has an established reputation of being a reformist, and the man who's currently in charge of the very challenging job of transforming the Indian Railways, the lifeline of this country. Speaking to us today, the Honourable Minister of Railways, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us. Sir, let me begin by talking about the 8.5 trillion investment plan that you have envisaged for railways over the next 5 years. You have clearly shown us the breakup, which makes it sound credible, of, say, getting 1.5 trillion from LIC, broadly 2 trillion from, say, the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund that the Finance Minister announced. You're going to look at tax-free bonds. You may even target sovereign pension funds. All of this in addition to the money you may get from the Finance Ministry and private investment and the surplus funds of PSU. My question to you, sir, is that if you look at it, about 50% or more seems to be in the form of debt. Do you think Indian Railways will be in a position to both repay and service this debt?
Railways is a commercial organization in a sense that it has to run its operation to earn revenues. Let us look at the answer of this question a little differently. Suppose if you don't make investment, then what happens is railways will not be able to expand the operations at all. Railways might even lose some of the customers that we have because they are already getting exasperated because we are not able to keep for a goods train, which provides us 2/3 of the revenue is coming from the freight. So they are feeling that there is no timetable for the train. There is no guarantee that it will reach at a particular time. So inefficiency of the operations of the goods sector is also causing a lot of concern to them. Passengers are not happy because they are not getting the type of services that we want. In fact, we have lost some passengers, in fact, in the past, the number of passengers we have lost. Now, what is the challenge for us? Is to get new customers, but also keep the existing ones.
Yeah.
Without them, we will not get revenues. Now, to get those customers and to retain existing customers, we must make investments. If you don't augment the capacity, how do you do it? So, augmentation of capacity is a must.
Right.
Now, if I can get augmentation of capacity done to an extent of 8,50,000 crores in the next 5 years by somebody who wants to give me charitable donation, I'll be more than happy. Or if you don't invest, would you be able to sustain the operations? So therefore, it is not a question of whether we want to do it or not. We have to do it to maintain our existing strength, to keep safety intact, to keep improving customer service, and also the type of delays that our services are causing today. The punctuality has taken a huge beating. To do that, we need money. Now, if the money is not available free of cost from somebody, then we have to either get it from the market or we should get it from the Finance Ministry. Now, the Finance Ministry, contrary to the belief, is also borrowing. So, if I borrow directly, it is a good idea, or I should just rely on my colleague Finance Minister, who is already under stress because we already put 53% of the divisible pool of the central government and the state government put together is going to the states. Now, in this context, we should find out a way, because if you don't expand, we are doomed. If you want to expand, we must find money. So that is the issue. Now, to answer the question about repayment of it. If you really look at it, the very fact that you are going to expand capacity, not necessarily in that proportion, your expenses go up.
Right.
Because there are certain fixed costs. The platforms are already there. The tracks are already laid down. Even if you lay down more tracks, we are going to run more trains, so you are going to get more revenues out of it. So the fixed cost gets absorbed over a much higher revenue, by which your incremental expenses that you are going to incur of course has to be made by the current income. But a fixed cost having been absorbed, which is the bulk of the expense of the railways. Railways have a huge fixed cost. So once the fixed costs get absorbed or higher revenue, the profitability will not increase the same proportion at which you are making investment. It will be rising higher. So that will be taken care of. In any way, to make sure that we handle it properly, and I am more concerned about it because I am a very conservative person, I have already asked SBI CAPS to look into the entire modalities of cash flows, etc., how to match the future revenues. In any case, loans like LIC, loans like World Bank, Finance Ministry loans, etc., will be available to us for a much longer duration. For example, LIC, we have already decided that the maturity will be 30 years. World Bank will be also possibly that.
We'll also now talk about the operating ratio, sir. You are targeting an operating ratio of 88.5%, the best in the last 9 years for the Indian Railways by the end of this fiscal. You have envisaged 8.5 trillion of investment over the next 5 years. So my question to you is, where do you see Indian Railways operating ratio 5 years after this 8.5 trillion of investment has taken place?
A very good question. In fact, I really appreciate what you're saying. I have a little, there are certain imponderables. So, when you plan for something, you have to first feel what is in your hand and what is beyond you. Like what you talk about externalities into this. You know, there is one externalities, it is a pay commission, which we don't know what's going to be the impact of that.
Sure.
So, and as you know, today more than 50% of the expenses of railways go into paying salaries and pensions. Right. So I would rather not therefore give you exact numbers. But what I can definitely tell you is something, again, there is another imponderable, and which I am trying to really lay my hands on it, is completion of dedicated freight corridor. In fact, I have already been telling my friends and colleagues here that dedicated freight corridor starts with the name dedicated. So please dedicate yourself to complete it faster. And I hope they complete it in the next 3 years. If they complete the dedicated freight corridor in 3 years, which I am really pursuing, and I hope it happens. Number two, if the pay commission is not going to put undue burden on the railways. Third, we continue to invest the money that we are planning to invest. End of 5 years, I feel that operating ratio should be really, really good. If you can increase your freight to 1.5 billion tons, which we are target for the 5 years,
right,
which again is dependent on the dedicated freight corridor getting ready. So therefore, the number of what could be the operating ratio will depend upon these externalities.
Would
but
you
will be definitely better.
Something, a number, at least in terms of target, if not what you actually see happening? Because we saw 76% was achieved in 2007, 2008, which was the best 9 years before this. Do you think you could come close to it, match it, or better it?
Yeah. Let us put this issue into perspective. That was the year when there was no impact of pay commission.
That is true.
In fact, the pay commission impact, that particular pay commission impact, it is literally like pre-Christ and post-Christ world. Literally.
Right.
So therefore, that impact was so huge that if you really recall, there's so many state governments were reeling under it even till yesterday, almost. So that was a huge impact.
Right.
So before that, the salary as a proportion of railways total income was not as high as it is today. So obviously you could achieve that ratio. But having now left with a legacy of having a very high proportion of your working expenses being consumed by salaries and wages and pension, you have to think about a new strategy. And that's what we are trying to do.
All right, sir. Now we talk, you want to say something?
If you want, I'll just explain to you that when we talk about this current year for the next fiscal, this current fiscal, we talked about this very ambitious target. That was also done on two counts. One is the rationalization of expenses. Like for example, electricity charges. I already given a target to them that why are you buying electricity at the highest rate when we are the biggest customer? In fact, the market rule demand that the biggest customer should get the least of the price. But still we are paying high.
You will save 3,000 crore on account of that.
Maybe more actually. But that's one part. The second part is increasing volume of cargo. And that's why we said this 1,200 million ton mission. Mission is implemented by our additional member, Mr. Jamshed. And who are the people who are implementing it? All our internal people whose actual job is to implement it.
Sure.
So the implementer are already implementing it. So therefore, this is one thing. I had personally reviewed the performance and these targets for the next year with the zones and the divisions who account for at least 75% of the total freight. We are going down to the level of each division. Each division, what type of cargo will handle.
Okay.
So it's not just
you'll streamline the process.
What do you mean by 10 million tons? How much of the coal? Which month you will handle that coal? Who is going to give you that coal? Who is the fertilizer? Who is going to give? So we'll get down to the basic, which of course I won't do it, but my colleagues will do it. But I told them to do it. So what will happen? All the 65 divisions will give you the information from bottoms up to know that how much target they are going to handle. We have already set a target, which is a macro level target for the railway corporate target, 1,200 million tons. So we'll have to match that to each other. And we'll see, probably we'll do a better job than this.